The Marvel Cinematic Universe and Marvel Studios, part of Walt Disney Company, have racked up billions of dollars in profits over the previous decade of box office dominance. But all of that changed with Phases 4 and 5, which seem a lackluster shadow of its former self. The Marvels is next up, and they are going to be competing not with Taylor Swift, who will certainly dominate the box office this fall, no question about that, but rather with Five Nights at Freddy's, which as it stands right now, might actually beat the Marvels opening weekend. Here we go. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today and join us every Sunday afternoon at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show. The first long-range box office forecast for the opening weekend of The Marvels and its extrapolated total theatrical run, at least domestically, is now out from Box Office Pro. Let's read what they have to say. Brie Larson's Captain Marvel was introduced in a highly successful and timely fashion back in 2018 and 2019 as her character was teased at the end of Avengers Infinity War in advance of her solo debut, which benefited from coming out less than 2 months before the massively anticipated Avengers Endgame. Now, they seemingly dance around the issue, but they're close, and you've heard me say this a number of times. It didn't matter what movie came out in the slot 2 months before Avengers Endgame. If it said Marvel in front of it, it was going to be a big hit. It didn't matter if it was Captain Marvel and Brie Larson or if it was a dead blind monkey laying on the screen watching grass grow for 2 hours. That movie was likely to get to $1 billion. First Captain Marvel movie is often lamented as one of the worst outings of the first 3 phases of the MCU, and I would tend to agree. It was just a bad film. And somehow audiences that actually showed up after they bought tickets, not the sold-out theaters that had less than half the seats full when the show started, went to it anyway because, well, it was next Marvel product and they had to see it before Endgame came out. But that's not happening this time. Phases 4 and 5 of Marvel have basically fallen off of a cliff, not only in the theatrical box office, but also in merchandise sales. Merchandise partners and toy partners have wanted to get out of having to create some toys for some of these newer characters that nobody is buying, that Disney is forcing them to do in order to keep making things like Spider-Man and Captain America and Thor and Iron Man, the things that are popular and still do sell. There's absolutely nothing to prop up the Marvels this time around. Obviously, there's not a ton of competition out this fall either, and that's thanks in large part to the writers and actor strikes going on. We've seen studios move some major releases from the fall to spring of next year. One that comes to mind is Dune, which was due out around the same time as the Marvels. Obviously, there's not a ton of competition out this fall either, and that's thanks in large part to the writers and actor strikes going on. We've seen studios move some major releases from the fall to spring of next year. One that comes to mind is Dune, which was due out around the same time as the Marvels. And then there's this other paragraph here from Box Office Pro. The promise of Brie Larson teaming up with other MCU characters from the sprawling universe's streaming series Ms. Marvel and WandaVision's Monica Rambeau alongside Sam Jackson's return as Nick Fury on the heels of this year's Secret Invasions could be attractive. Yeah, let's go ahead and stop right there. None of those shows were terribly popular. WandaVision was okay, but it's not like a whole lot of people watched WandaVision, and even far fewer people actually bothered to tune in to Ms. Marvel. So even though these shows were part of the MCU and on Disney+, kind of like the Ahsoka thing that we had a few weeks ago, where unless you watched Clone Wars and Rebels, the animated shows years ago, you were lost when Ahsoka came on. So too, I think, is going to be the case for the Marvels, because nobody knows who Ms. Marvel and Monica Rambeau are, and I think even fewer people care. And then let's talk about Nick Fury and Secret Invasion, another show that didn't exactly climb its way up the Nielsen charts, or even Samba TV for that matter. Secret Invasion was a $212 million production budgeted debacle for the Walt Disney Company and for Marvel Studios. Really, that was not a show that most people cared for. Another terrible lead-in to this movie. These other shows, the Ms. Marvels and the Secret Invasions, should have been a push into this. Had they been more popular, then maybe the Marvels would have a better chance of success, but as it stands right now, this movie is looking to lose a ton of cash. Now, let's not also forget that The Marvels was originally due to come out in July a few months ago, but that was pushed back to November and switched around with The Haunted Mansion, another Disney release, because The Marvels earlier this year was chosen for delay, and probably because of they needed to go in and do a lot of reshoots for this movie just to make it palatable. The problem is those reshoots would have come with even more production costs, which are going to be even a bigger problem once this movie hits the actual theaters in a few weeks. But here's another real problem that goes to show everything we've been telling you about the MCU. This from Box Office Pro: social media traction for the Marvels has been noticeably weak in recent months, compounded by concerns that the ongoing labor strikes in Hollywood may not resolve in time for Brie Larson and the rest of the cast to promote the film. Their absence on the media circuit would be a major blow in Disney's efforts to pitch the film as a fun, escapist experience, leaning into its organic girl power marketing message to bring out the underserved female audiences. Social media interest in the Marvels has been low because nobody cares about the Marvels. Nobody ever really cared about Captain Marvel, but for the reasons that we covered earlier. Its positioning in the theatrical release slot in Phase 3. But in terms of Brie Larson not being able to be out there on the red carpet and promoting this film, I think Disney should consider that a blessing. And then let's get to this girl power messaging bit. Like, this is going to help the movie somehow. It hasn't worked for anything else. Every time they try to make big female-centric action movies of this scale, they never seem to go off. What girls are looking for, apparently, are more girly films. Things like, I don't know, Barbie. Why do you think that movie did about $1.4 billion in the box office this year? The Marvels was never, ever going to have the Barbie effect. And quite frankly, I think the Marvels would be damn lucky to even see a third of the box office of Barbie, even if Brie Larson was out there. The next big problem for the Marvels is the almost immediate competition. The Hunger Games prequel, The Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes, comes out the very next week after The Marvels. That means The Marvels is really only going to have about 7 days at the box office to itself before that next movie comes out. And then, of course, Disney's own animated feature, Wish, comes out 2 weeks later. By the time The Marvels comes out and collapses in the first weekend, Disney is probably already going to be pulling the cord on the marketing budget and then shifting things over to Wish. The Marvels is just probably not going to go anywhere. But here's the real ugly truth. Initial pre-sales for the Marvels at this first measurement are alarmingly low for a Marvel Studios film, according to Box Office Pro. Trends suggest that it currently paces 69% behind Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and 72% behind Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, 42% behind the Eternals. Ant-Man 3 and the Eternals were two of the absolute worst performing films at the box office, and they're telling you that the Marvels is pacing at least 50 to 70% behind them. So what is Box Office Pro suggesting for the Marvels opening weekend as of this first measurement? They're looking at $50 to $75 million, you can see right there on the screen, with an estimated total domestic run of 120 to 189 million. Folks, let me tell you, I think those numbers are probably going to wind up being generous. This is only the first week. That means that these numbers will be subject to change, as they often do. That means what they're doing right now is they're looking at how many ticket pre-sales happened leading up to this point. They do the measurement and then presume going forward that ticket pre-sales are going to follow a similar pattern in the coming weeks. But that really hasn't been the case with Marvel. Just as we've talked many times about how Marvel movies open so heavily front-loaded, meaning by the time you get through the first 4 or 5 days of a Marvel movie's box office, you've already got about half the box office baked in. There are exceptions to the rule, things like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which got great word of mouth after it opened and carried the movie unexpectedly well for the next several weeks. I don't think we're going to get that with the Marvels. But here's the real kicker, folks. Look at Five Nights at Freddy's. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a very, very popular video game franchise that has a very, very strong following. It's already looking at $50 million of an opening weekend. That's basically the bottom end of the Marvels opening weekend. And I can tell you, apart from this being up 13% in the projections over the long-range box office forecast for the same film last week, that last week projection was up 25% from the week before that. That means that Five Nights at Freddy's is gaining momentum, double-digit percentage increases week over week in the box office projections since they began a few weeks ago. That is absolutely amazing, and I think by the time we get to the release of this film 2 weeks from now, that those numbers could potentially be even higher. What makes it even worse for the Marvels is that the Marvels is going to be a theatrically exclusive release with a 45-day window, or perhaps thereabout. Disney may actually pull the cord sooner to get it on Disney Plus if the performance is really terrible. Five Nights at Freddy's, however, a $25 million production budget film that was shot almost entirely here in Louisiana, well, they've already made their money back. At least Blumhouse has, because they've already been paid their production budget back by Peacock, Universal Studios, because Five Nights at Freddy's, even with that kind of box office haul, it's still going to be released day and date on Peacock streaming service. Imagine what these projections might be if they did not have a current day and date release on the proprietary streaming service. We might be looking at an $80 million plus opening weekend for Five Nights at Freddy's. It could still do that. There is a lot of fan base behind this that's going to drive it. But no matter what the case, the MCU is looking to end this Phase 5 misery on a sour note, coming in with the Marvels, and that probably isn't going to bode well for the next one up, which I believe is Captain Falcon, New World, Brave Order, whatever they keep changing the title to now. That's supposed to be coming out in 2024, and I can't imagine there's going to be a whole lot of interest in that one either. Disney CEO Bob Iger has stated a number of times in the past couple of months that they are looking to really rein in the spending on these budgets, these costs for these big Marvel productions. A lot of big Disney IPs. Not only the costs, but the number of actual projects that they greenlight. I think the things on Disney Plus are really going to get cut hard, but we'll probably see something similar on the theatrical side, especially considering the costs of these films to produce, at least for what Disney is doing, is not anywhere near being justified by the audience and box office that is showing up at the retail level. And again, it's not as if they're selling any merchandise for these new characters, or at least very, very little. Certainly not enough to make their merchandising partners happy at all. Let me know your thoughts. Are you interested in the Marvels? Are you interested in Five Nights at Freddy's? Are you going to go check them out? And of course, until next time, take care. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.